Sarah Martinez looked like any other graduate student at the university coffee shop. She wore oversized glasses, carried textbooks about environmental science, and always ordered the same vanilla latte with extra foam. Her laugh was soft and genuine. Her smile could light up a room, and when she talked about saving endangered species, her eyes sparkled with passion. Marcus Thompson had been trying to work up the courage to ask her out for 3 months. He was a journalism major who spent most of his time buried in research about investigative reporting. But every Tuesday and Thursday at 2 p.m., he found himself at the same corner table, stealing glances at the girl who seemed to embody everything pure and peaceful in the world. What Marcus didn't know was that Sarah's textbooks hid something else entirely. Beneath her notes about climate change and wildlife conservation were detailed maps, wind calculations, and trajectory charts. The calluses on her hands weren't from rock climbing like she claimed. They were from years of handling precision rifles. Her steady hands that so gently stirred her coffee had once held the power of life and death from distances most people couldn't even imagine. Sarah Martinez wasn't just a graduate student. She was Elena Volkov, former Russian military sniper with 43 confirmed kills, living under deep cover in suburban America. And tonight, her past was about to collide with her carefully constructed new life in the most terrifying way possible. The silence that was coming would be deafening. The kind of silence that only exists in the moments between a sniper's breath and the squeeze of a trigger. The kind of silence that Marcus was about to learn could mean the difference between life and death. Because sometimes, the most dangerous people are the ones who look the most innocent. And sometimes, love blooms in the most impossible circumstances, even when bullets start flying and the truth becomes deadlier than any lie. Marcus Thompson adjusted his laptop screen for the 5th time, pretending to read the same paragraph about media ethics while his eyes kept drifting to the girl 3 tables away. Sarah Martinez sat with perfect posture, her auburn hair catching the afternoon sunlight streaming through the coffee shop windows. She was beautiful in an understated way, like someone who didn't realize her own appeal. Her fingers moved gracefully across the keyboard of her laptop, occasionally pausing to sip from her ceramic mug or push her glasses up her nose. For 3 months, this had been Marcus's routine. Every Tuesday and Thursday at exactly 2 p.m., he would claim the corner table at Grounds for Learning, order a black coffee he didn't really want, and watch Sarah work. He had learned her habits without meaning to become a stalker. She always arrived 10 minutes early, always ordered a vanilla latte with extra foam, always sat at the same table near the window, and always left precisely at 4:30 p.m. when her environmental science study group disbanded. Today felt different, though. Today, Marcus had finally worked up the courage to do more than just observe. Hidden in his backpack was a small potted succulent he had bought from the campus greenhouse, along with a handwritten note asking if she would like to grab dinner sometime. His journalism professor had always said that the best stories began with taking risks, and Marcus figured this logic could apply to romance as well. Sarah seemed completely absorbed in her work, occasionally making notes in the margins of what appeared to be a thick textbook about wildlife conservation. She would sometimes smile to herself while reading, as if she found genuine joy in learning about endangered species and habitat preservation. Marcus found this passion incredibly attractive. In a world full of people chasing money and fame, here was someone who genuinely cared about making the world a better place. What Marcus couldn't see from his vantage point was the true nature of Sarah's notes. Between the legitimate environmental science content, she was practicing a completely different kind of calculation. Wind speed adjustments, elevation compensations, target acquisition techniques. The margins of her textbook contained mathematical formulas that had nothing to do with saving pandas or protecting rainforests. Sarah Martinez was actually Elena Volkov, and she was very good at maintaining her cover. Her transformation had taken 2 years of intensive preparation. She had learned to walk differently, to change her posture, to modulate her voice to lose any trace of her Russian accent. She had studied environmental science extensively enough to maintain conversations with actual graduate students. She had even developed genuine interests in some aspects of conservation work, finding it easier to inhabit a role that contained elements of truth. The coffee shop represented safety to her. It was public enough that she could observe potential threats while maintaining the appearance of a normal college student. The routine gave her life structure and normalcy, two things she had never experienced during her military years. For the first time in her adult life, she could sit somewhere without automatically calculating sight lines and escape routes, without her hand instinctively moving toward a concealed weapon. But old habits died hard, and Elena was more aware of her surroundings than any real graduate student would be. She had noticed Marcus watching her weeks ago. At first, she had cataloged him as a potential threat, memorizing his schedule and observing his behavior patterns. It hadn't taken long to determine that he was exactly what he appeared to be, a shy journalism student with a harmless crush. This realization had created an unexpected problem. Elena found herself looking forward to seeing Marcus. She had begun choosing outfits with more care on Tuesdays and Thursdays, had started lingering longer at the coffee shop than her security protocols recommended. For someone trained to eliminate emotions that could compromise missions, this development was deeply troubling. Elena had been stationed in this college town for 8 months as part of a long-term intelligence operation. Her handler, Victor, had placed her here to monitor the activities of Dr. James Morrison, a physics professor whose research into electromagnetic pulse weapons had caught the attention of several foreign governments. It was supposed to be a simple surveillance assignment, gathering information about Morrison's work and reporting on his contacts and communications. The mission was supposed to last 2 years, giving Elena time to establish her cover identity thoroughly and gain Morrison's trust. She had enrolled in graduate school legitimately, using forged but sophisticated academic records that would stand up to scrutiny. The Russian intelligence service had invested significant resources in creating Sarah Martinez's background, complete with social media history, academic achievements, and even fake family photographs. Elena excelled at long-term undercover work because she had never formed strong emotional attachments. Her childhood in a Russian military family had been structured and disciplined, preparing her for a life of service to the state. Her sniper training had reinforced the importance of emotional detachment and analytical thinking. She was proud of her ability to remain objective and focused, no matter how long an assignment lasted. But something about this peaceful college town was affecting her in ways she hadn't anticipated. Maybe it was the absence of constant danger, or the simple pleasure of attending lectures about subjects that had nothing to do with warfare. Maybe it was the kindness of her professors and fellow students, who treated her as a peer rather than a weapon to be deployed. For the first time in her life, Elena was experiencing what normal people called happiness. Marcus represented everything Elena had never allowed herself to want. He was gentle and thoughtful, passionate about truth and justice in a way that seemed naive but refreshing. When she watched him work on his articles for the campus newspaper, she could see the genuine care he put into getting details right and telling stories that mattered. He was the kind of person who would hold doors for strangers and remember the names of coffee shop employees. The irony wasn't lost on Elena that she was falling for someone whose entire career was built around uncovering the truth, while her entire existence was built on living a lie. But in her quiet moments, she allowed herself to imagine what it might be like to actually be Sarah Martinez, to really be studying environmental science, to have the freedom to care about someone like Marcus without putting his life in danger. Today, she could sense that Marcus was planning something. His nervous energy was more pronounced than usual, and he kept checking his backpack as if he was carrying something important. Elena's training made her hyper-aware of changes in people's behavior patterns, but she found herself hoping that his nervousness was related to romantic intentions rather than anything threatening. The coffee shop was busy today, filled with students preparing for midterm exams. The familiar sounds of typing, quiet conversations, and the espresso machine created a comforting background noise. Elena had grown to love these ordinary sounds, so different from the tense silence of sniper positions or the harsh voices of military commanders. Here, the biggest drama was usually someone's laptop battery dying or the Wi-Fi going out. She allowed herself a small smile as she pretended to read about endangered tigers while actually reviewing her mental notes about Dr. Morrison's recent activities. The professor had been working late in his lab more frequently, and his email patterns suggested increased communication with overseas contacts. Elena would need to find a way to get closer to his research, possibly by volunteering as a research assistant or finding an excuse to visit his lab. But for now, in this moment, she could simply enjoy being Sarah Martinez, graduate student, surrounded by the normal concerns of normal people living normal lives. She could drink her latte and watch the cute journalism student work up the courage to talk to her, and pretend that her biggest worry was whether she would have time to finish her environmental policy paper before the deadline. Marcus finally stood up, taking a deep breath as he approached her table. Elena felt her heart rate increase slightly. Though whether from genuine nervousness or ingrained threat assessment, she couldn't be sure. She looked up from her textbook with what she hoped was an encouraging smile, ready to see what the sweet journalism student had been planning for so many weeks. Neither of them could have known that this simple moment of connection was about to set in motion a chain of events that would shatter both of their carefully constructed worlds. Love and deception, truth and lies, past and future were about to collide in ways that neither Sarah Martinez nor Elena Volkov was prepared to handle. The afternoon sunlight continued to stream through the coffee shop windows, illuminating what appeared to be nothing more than a typical college romance beginning to bloom. But appearances, as Elena knew better than anyone, could be dangerously deceiving. The small succulent sat between them on the red checkered tablecloth, its tiny leaves catching the warm glow of the Italian restaurant's candles. Sarah had accepted Marcus's dinner invitation with a smile that seemed genuinely pleased, and now, 3 days later, they were sharing their first real meal together. Marcus couldn't stop grinning, still amazed that the beautiful environmental science student had said yes. Sarah had chosen the restaurant, a cozy family-owned place called Nana's that was tucked away on a quiet side street. Marcus had been surprised by her choice, expecting someone studying conservation to prefer a trendy farm-to-table spot near campus. But Sarah had explained that she loved authentic Italian food and had heard wonderful things about Nana's homemade pasta. What she didn't mention was that the restaurant's layout provided excellent sight lines of all entrances and exits, and its location on a less busy street made surveillance easier to detect. Elena had spent considerable time preparing for this date, not just choosing an outfit and researching conversation topics, but also conducting a thorough background check on Marcus Thompson. She had used her intelligence resources to verify that he was exactly who he claimed to be, a 24-year-old journalism student from a middle-class family in Ohio, with no connections to foreign intelligence services or military organizations. His biggest secret appeared to be that he had failed his first attempt at the driving test and hadn't told his friends about it. This level of normalcy should have been reassuring, but it actually made Elena more nervous. She was accustomed to dealing with dangerous people who had hidden agendas. Marcus's genuine nature made her feel vulnerable in ways that enemy agents never had. When he looked at her with those warm brown eyes, she felt like he could see straight through all her carefully constructed defenses. Marcus had arrived at the restaurant 15 minutes early, his dark hair still damp from the shower, and wearing a button-down shirt that Elena suspected was new, based on the precise creases that indicated recent unpacking. He had stood when she approached the table, a gesture of courtesy that her Russian military background found both quaint and appealing. The small bouquet of wildflowers he had brought made her chest tighten with an emotion she couldn't quite identify. The conversation flowed surprisingly easily. Marcus was an excellent listener, asking thoughtful questions about her environmental science program and sharing stories about his journalism projects. He told her about an article he was writing about the town's efforts to restore a local wetland area, his enthusiasm infectious as he described interviewing elderly residents who remembered when the area had been a thriving ecosystem decades earlier. Sarah found herself genuinely engaged, not just maintaining her cover, but actually enjoying the discussion. She had studied environmental issues extensively as part of her identity preparation, but talking with Marcus made her realize how much she had come to care about these topics beyond their utility as cover stories. His passion for environmental protection reminded her of her own childhood in rural Russia before military service had taken her away from the forests and rivers she had loved. Elena had grown up in Siberia, in a small town surrounded by wilderness that stretched for hundreds of miles in every direction. Her father had been a career military officer, stern and demanding, but on weekends he would take her hunting and fishing, teaching her to read animal tracks and weather patterns. Those childhood skills had later proved invaluable in her sniper training. But she rarely allowed herself to remember the innocent joy she had felt exploring the wilderness with her father. Marcus was telling her about his family's tradition of camping in Ohio's state parks when Elena realized she was genuinely smiling, not the careful expression she had practiced for her cover identity. The warmth she felt wasn't calculated or strategic. For a moment, she let herself imagine what it would be like to go camping with Marcus, to share stories around a campfire without wondering if every word might be her last mistake. The waiter, an elderly Italian man who seemed to know every regular customer by name, brought their appetizer of bruschetta and olive tapenade. Marcus had let Sarah order wine, deferring to her knowledge of Italian vintages. She had chosen a Chianti that paired well with their meal, knowledge gained not from her environmental science cover story, but from a mission she had completed in Tuscany 3 years earlier. She had spent 2 weeks infiltrating a arms dealers organization, posing as a sophisticated art buyer with expensive tastes. That mission seemed like another lifetime now, as Marcus told her about his plans to travel to Central America after graduation to report on deforestation issues. His idealism was both endearing and terrifying. Elena could see a dozen ways such a trip could go wrong, how naive journalists often became targets for criminal organizations or corrupt government officials. The protective instinct she felt toward Marcus was stronger than anything she had experienced during her military career. Elena's phone buzzed with a message, and she glanced at it reflexively. Victor, her handler, was requesting a status update on her surveillance of Dr. Morrison. She had been so focused on preparing for this date that she had delayed filing her regular report. Marcus noticed her momentary distraction and apologized for keeping her from important messages, but she quickly reassured him that it was nothing urgent, just a study group reminder. The lie came easily, as all lies did for Elena, but it left a bitter taste that no amount of wine could wash away. Every moment of happiness with Marcus was built on deception. Every laugh, every shared glance, every spark of connection existed in a foundation of falsehoods that could collapse at any moment. She was trained to compartmentalize emotions, to separate personal feelings from professional obligations. But Marcus was making that discipline increasingly difficult to maintain. Their main courses arrived, Elena's seafood risotto and Marcus's eggplant parmesan, both expertly prepared and beautifully presented. Marcus admitted that he rarely ate at restaurants this nice, usually surviving on campus dining hall food and late-night pizza. Elena found his honesty refreshing after years of dealing with people who constantly posed and performed. Even her own existence had become a performance, though she was beginning to lose track of where Sarah Martinez ended and Elena Volkov began. Marcus started telling her about his journalism professors, particularly one who had worked as a foreign correspondent and shared stories about reporting from conflict zones. Elena listened with genuine interest, though some of the professor's anecdotes about war-torn countries brought back memories she preferred to keep buried. She had operated in several of the regions Marcus described, though from a very different perspective than any journalist would have experienced. When Marcus mentioned that his professor had covered the conflict in Chechnya, Elena felt her carefully maintained composure slip slightly. She had served 3 tours in Chechnya, some of her most difficult and dangerous missions. The professor's stories about civilian casualties and humanitarian disasters represented the other side of operations Elena had been part of. She excused herself to visit the restroom, needing a moment to regain her emotional equilibrium. Standing in the small, dimly lit restroom, Elena looked at herself in the ornate mirror above the vintage sink. Sarah Martinez looked back at her, soft and peaceful, wearing a blue dress that brought out her eyes and made her look like any other graduate student on a first date. But Elena could see the shadows beneath the surface, the alertness that never quite disappeared, the slight tension in her shoulders that came from years of expecting danger around every corner. She splashed cool water on her wrists, a technique she had learned from managing stress during long surveillance operations. She needed to focus, to remember why she was here and what her real objectives were. Getting emotionally involved with Marcus wasn't just unprofessional, it was dangerous. For both of them. Her feelings for him could compromise her mission, but, more importantly, her presence in his life could put him in mortal danger if her cover was ever blown. When she returned to the table, Marcus was studying the dessert menu with the serious concentration he seemed to apply to everything he cared about. He looked up with that warm smile that made her chest tighten, and she realized that her internal lecture about emotional distance had been completely ineffective. If anything, the brief separation had made her more aware of how much she enjoyed his company. Marcus had ordered tiramisu to share, explaining that he had never tried it but had always been curious about coffee-flavored desserts. Elena found his culinary adventurousness charming, remembering her own first taste of tiramisu during a mission in Rome. She had been posing as a wealthy widow on vacation, and her target had taken her to an expensive restaurant overlooking the Colosseum. The contrast between that calculated seduction and this innocent first date was striking. As they shared the dessert, Marcus accidentally got mascarpone cream on his nose. Elena laughed, a genuine sound of delight, and reached across the table to wipe it away with her napkin. The simple gesture felt more intimate than anything she had experienced in years of undercover work. Marcus's cheeks flushed slightly, and he thanked her with an embarrassed smile that made him look even younger than his 24 years. The evening was winding down, but neither seemed eager for it to end. Marcus paid the check despite Sarah's offer to split it, explaining that his grandmother had taught him that a gentleman always paid on the first date. Elena found his old-fashioned courtesy both amusing and touching. In her world, relationships were strategic alliances, and casual encounters were tactical opportunities. The idea of someone taking her on a date simply because he enjoyed her company was foreign and wonderful. They walked slowly back toward campus, taking the long route through the historic downtown area. The evening was warm for October, with a gentle breeze that carried the scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke from someone's fireplace. Marcus pointed out details about the town's architecture, sharing stories he had researched for various newspaper articles. Elena listened attentively, filing away information that might be useful for her mission while genuinely enjoying his enthusiasm for local history. When they reached Sarah's apartment building, Marcus walked her to the door with the careful politeness of someone who wanted to do everything right. Elena could sense his nervousness about how to end the evening, and she found his uncertainty endearing rather than awkward. In her experience, men who were confident about bedroom strategies were usually the most dangerous. Marcus's shy respect made her feel safe in a way she had almost forgotten was possible. They stood facing each other under the soft glow of the porch light, both knowing the evening was ending but neither quite ready to say goodbye. Marcus thanked her for agreeing to dinner, stumbling slightly over his words as he expressed how much he had enjoyed her company. Elena felt a powerful urge to tell him the truth, to warn him that she wasn't who she seemed to be, that caring about her could put him in danger. Instead, she told him honestly that she had had a wonderful time and would love to see him again. When Marcus finally worked up the courage to kiss her goodnight, it was gentle and brief, the kind of kiss that promised more without demanding anything. Elena felt something crack in the wall she had built around her emotions, a hairline fracture that she knew could eventually bring everything crashing down. As she watched him walk away, hands in his pockets and a spring in his step, she realized that her biggest challenge wouldn't be maintaining her cover or completing her mission. It would be finding a way to protect Marcus from the truth about who she really was and what her presence in his life might ultimately cost him. 3 weeks into their relationship, Marcus had begun to notice things about Sarah that didn't quite add up. Small things that individually seemed insignificant, but together created a pattern that his journalistic instincts couldn't ignore. The way she always positioned herself facing the door in restaurants. How she could estimate distances with uncanny accuracy when they walked around campus. The fact that she never seemed startled by sudden noises that made other people jump. Most puzzling was her physical coordination. Sarah claimed to be clumsy and often made self-deprecating jokes about her lack of athletic ability, but Marcus had seen her reflexes in action. When a careless student had knocked over his coffee cup in the library, Sarah had caught it mid-fall without even looking up from her textbook. When they were walking downtown and a car had backfired, she had instinctively moved to put herself between Marcus and the sound before seemingly realizing her reaction was unusual. Elena was becoming increasingly aware of her slipping discipline. 20 years of training had taught her to maintain character consistency at all times. But being around Marcus made her forget to be clumsy Sarah Martinez. His presence made her feel relaxed in a way that was professionally dangerous. When she felt safe, her natural capabilities emerged without conscious permission. She caught herself walking with military posture, scanning crowds with tactical awareness, and demonstrating skills that environmental science students didn't typically possess. The pressure from her handler Victor wasn't helping her emotional stability. Dr. Morrison's research had reached a critical phase, and intelligence reports suggested that other foreign services were also moving to acquire his electromagnetic pulse technology. Victor had been clear that Elena needed to accelerate her timeline for getting close to Morrison and accessing his laboratory. The mission that was supposed to unfold over 2 years now had a deadline of 6 weeks. Elena had managed to get herself invited to one of Dr. Morrison's graduate seminars by expressing interest in the environmental applications of alternative energy research. The professor was exactly what she had expected from his files. Brilliant, but absent-minded, passionate about his work, but naive about security implications, and genuinely excited to share his knowledge with interested students. Under other circumstances, Elena might have found him likable. The seminar met twice a week in Morrison's laboratory, a cluttered but well-equipped space in the basement of the physics building. Elena had memorized the layout during her first visit, noting security cameras, access points, and the location of Morrison's personal computer terminal. Getting access to his research files would require either gaining his complete trust or finding a way to bypass the laboratory's security systems during off-hours. Marcus had been thrilled when Sarah told him about joining Morrison's seminar, seeing it as evidence of her growing interest in cutting-edge environmental solutions. He had even offered to help her prepare for the advanced physics concepts they would be discussing, not knowing that Elena already understood electromagnetic theory better than most graduate students. She had accepted his offer anyway, enjoying the excuse to spend more time with him while maintaining her cover as an eager but inexperienced student. Their study sessions had become Elena's favorite part of her week. Marcus was an excellent teacher, patient and encouraging as he walked her through complex equations and theoretical concepts. He had a gift for making difficult ideas accessible, explaining scientific principles through analogies and real-world examples. Elena found herself learning things that had nothing to do with her mission, simply because Marcus's enthusiasm for knowledge was infectious. But the intimacy of these tutoring sessions was making her situation increasingly complicated. When Marcus leaned close to point out details in a textbook, when he smiled with pride at her quick understanding of difficult concepts, when he absently touched her hand while explaining a particularly complex theory, Elena felt her professional detachment eroding. She was beginning to care more about Marcus's opinion of her intelligence than about maintaining her cover story's limitations. The worst part was that Marcus was falling in love with a person who didn't really exist. Every compliment he gave Sarah Martinez, every moment of tenderness they shared, was based on an elaborate fiction. Elena found herself wanting to be worthy of his feelings while knowing that the truth about her identity would destroy any possibility of a real relationship between them. She was trapped between the mission she was trained to complete and the man she was growing to love. Victor had begun requesting more frequent meetings, a sign that pressure was mounting from his superiors in Moscow. Their latest rendezvous had taken place in a truck stop diner 40 miles from campus, a location chosen for its distance from university surveillance and its transient clientele. Victor's usually calm demeanor showed cracks of stress as he reviewed Elena's progress reports and outlined new requirements for the mission. Morrison's research was apparently more advanced than intelligence estimates had suggested. His electromagnetic pulse technology could potentially neutralize entire military communication networks, making it invaluable to any country seeking asymmetric warfare capabilities. Several other intelligence services had been identified as having assets in the area, including Chinese and Iranian operatives whose methods were typically less subtle than Russian approaches. The situation was becoming a race, and Victor's superiors weren't interested in coming in second place. Elena was ordered to accelerate her infiltration of Morrison's inner circle by any means necessary. Victor suggested that she might need to develop a romantic relationship with the professor or find compromising information that could be used for blackmail. The thought of using the same manipulative techniques on Morrison that she had employed against dozens of previous targets made Elena feel physically ill. The sweet old professor reminded her of the grandfather she had loved as a child, before military service had taught her that emotional attachments were weaknesses to be exploited. More troubling was Victor's casual mention that Marcus Thompson had appeared in some of their surveillance photographs. Elena's relationship with the journalism student had been noted by Moscow, and questions were being asked about whether her emotional involvement was compromising her operational effectiveness. Victor assured her that Marcus wasn't currently considered a threat, but the implication was clear. If he became a liability, he would be eliminated without hesitation. The fear that gripped Elena at Victor's words was unlike anything she had experienced in combat situations. She had faced death many times in her military career, had operated in hostile territory where capture meant torture and execution, but the thought of Marcus being hurt because of her presence in his life created a panic that threatened to overwhelm her training. She realized that protecting Marcus had become more important to her than completing her mission, a shift in priorities that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. Elena began taking additional precautions to ensure that Marcus remained unaware of her true activities. She varied her routes between meetings with Victor, used sophisticated counter-surveillance techniques to detect potential watchers, and created elaborate cover stories to explain her occasional absences. The mental energy required to maintain operational security while protecting her relationship was exhausting. But the alternative was unthinkable. Dr. Morrison had begun inviting select seminar students to informal dinners at his home, an opportunity that Elena couldn't ignore despite the increased risk it represented. The professor's house would likely contain personal computers and research files that weren't available in the laboratory. These social gatherings represented her best chance to complete the mission without resorting to more aggressive techniques that could draw unwanted attention. Marcus had been invited to one of these dinners as well, after expressing interest in writing an article about environmental applications of alternative energy research. Elena felt sick when she learned that they would both be attending Morrison's next dinner party, knowing that she would have to maintain her cover while potentially conducting intelligence operations under Marcus's unknowing observation. The evening would be a test of her ability to compartmentalize her feelings while executing professional responsibilities. The dinner party was scheduled for Saturday evening at Morrison's Victorian house on the outskirts of town. Elena spent days planning her approach, studying the house's layout through public records and satellite imagery, identifying potential security vulnerabilities and escape routes. She would need to find excuses to move through the house alone, accessing Morrison's private spaces while maintaining the appearance of a social guest interested only in academic conversations. Elena also had to prepare for the possibility that other intelligence operatives might be present at the party. Morrison's social circle likely included other researchers and graduate students, any of whom could be working for competing intelligence services. She would need to identify potential threats while protecting her own cover, all while ensuring that Marcus remained unaware of the dangerous undercurrents surrounding their pleasant academic gathering. The night before the party, Marcus came to Sarah's apartment with a bottle of wine and homemade cookies from his mother's recipe. He was excited about the dinner, seeing it as an opportunity to make professional connections that could help his journalism career. Elena watched him planning questions for Morrison about renewable energy research, his enthusiasm and innocence breaking her heart. Marcus had no idea that he was about to walk into a situation where international espionage intersected with academic hospitality. Elena held Marcus close that night, memorizing the feeling of his arms around her, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the way he murmured her fake name in his sleep. She knew that everything was about to change. The mission timeline was accelerating, other intelligence services were closing in, and her own emotional compromise was becoming impossible to hide. The peaceful life she had built as Sarah Martinez was about to collide with the dangerous reality of Elena Volkov's past. As dawn approached, Elena lay awake planning for multiple contingencies. She might need to abandon her cover and disappear from Marcus's life to protect him from the consequences of her mission. she might need to choose between completing her assignment and maintaining the relationship that had become the most important thing in her world. Whatever happened at Morrison's dinner party, Elena knew that the innocent romance between Sarah Martinez and Marcus Thompson was about to end forever. The only question was whether either of them would survive the truth about who she really was and what she had been sent to do. Dr. Morrison's Victorian house sat on 2 acres of wooded property, its wraparound porch decorated with autumn flowers and warm yellow lights. As Marcus and Sarah walked up the gravel driveway, Elena's trained eyes automatically cataloged security details. No visible cameras, motion sensor lights that could be avoided, old-style locks that would be easy to bypass, and multiple exit points through windows and back doors. To Marcus, it simply looked like the charming home of an eccentric professor who collected vintage scientific instruments and had a weakness for elaborate dinner parties. Elena wore a navy blue dress that appeared elegant but conservative, though it had been chosen specifically for its flexibility and the way it concealed the small knife she kept strapped to her thigh. Old habits died hard, and despite the apparent safety of an academic dinner party, she never went anywhere completely unarmed. Marcus had complimented her appearance with shy enthusiasm, not knowing that every detail of her outfit had been calculated for operational effectiveness. Morrison greeted them at the door with genuine warmth, introducing them to the other guests who had already arrived. The group included 3 other graduate students from various departments, a visiting professor from MIT, Morrison's research assistant Dr. Jennifer Park, and a middle-aged man named David Chun who was introduced as a technology consultant interested in academic research applications. Elena's instincts immediately flagged Chun as potentially dangerous, noting his careful posture and the way his eyes swept the room in patterns similar to her own surveillance techniques. The house's interior matched its Victorian exterior, with period furniture and walls lined with books and scientific memorabilia. Morrison led them on a brief tour, proudly showing off his collection of antique telescopes and early electromagnetic equipment. Elena memorized the layout while appearing to listen to historical anecdotes about famous physicists. She noted the location of Morrison's home office, the basement workshop where he sometimes worked on personal projects, and the security system control panel hidden behind a reproduction of a 19th-century electrical diagram. Marcus was in his element, asking thoughtful questions about Morrison's research and taking mental notes for his article. He seemed particularly interested in the environmental implications of electromagnetic technology, and Morrison responded enthusiastically to his questions about renewable energy applications. Elena found herself genuinely proud of Marcus's intelligence and curiosity, even as she mentally planned her approach to accessing Morrison's private computer files during the evening. Dinner was served in Morrison's formal dining room, a candlelit space dominated by a mahogany table that seated 12. Elena maneuvered to sit where she could observe all the guests while maintaining visual contact with the house's main exits. The conversation flowed from academic topics to personal interests, with Morrison proving to be an engaging host who encouraged everyone to share their backgrounds and research interests. David Chun claimed to be developing commercial applications for university research, specializing in technology transfer and patent licensing. His knowledge of physics seemed genuine, but Elena detected subtle inconsistencies in his story that suggested a more sophisticated background than he was admitting. When he asked seemingly casual questions about Morrison's current projects, Elena recognized the techniques of a skilled intelligence operative gathering information under social cover. The realization that she wasn't the only spy at Morrison's dinner party created multiple tactical problems. Elena needed to complete her own mission while preventing Chun from achieving his objectives, all without exposing her cover identity to Marcus or the other legitimate guests. The evening had transformed from a social gathering into a complex game of espionage, with multiple players pursuing conflicting goals while maintaining facades of academic interest. Morrison's research assistant, Dr. Park, seemed unaware of the undercurrents surrounding her mentor's work. She spoke passionately about their collaboration on electromagnetic shielding technology, apparently unaware that such research had obvious military applications.